All right. Got our test run out of the way. It's a beautiful Saturday morning. I recorded this once before. I got through all of it, and I went back and I rewatched the video, and the frame rate was just so bad I had to redo it. So we're doing it in another video here. My name is Dustin. I'm the organizer of a tabletop gaming community, the Order of the Crimson Aegis. What I want to cover today is we're going to go through the recent 5e Ravenloft game that I wrapped up. I'm going to give a play-by-play. So this video is going to be entirely too long. I'm recording it so we can remember this. The players can remember it. I can remember it for myself and review and improve as a game master. So if that's not your thing, you're probably not going to like this video. But if you'd like to see how my table, my players and I specifically ran through this Ravenloft adventure, then you're welcome to stick around. Something I didn't cover in the previous prep video that I did is we actually didn't use the Foundry VTT integration for 5e for our dice roll. I mean, we did some dice rolls in it, but primarily we actually ran this out of D&D Beyond on the character sheets, and we used Foundry more as for scenes, for ambiance, for relative positioning of tokens. That kind of thing is what we did. We have a couple other things in here, notably for combat on the theater, the mine scenes that we're using from James RPG Art. We use the ultimate dungeon terrain concept that I've adapted to Foundry VTT. So you'll see some overlays that have the different zones. A description of that's out of the scope for this video, but suffice it to say that each one of those segments represents a zone in zone combat, whether something is near or arm's length or far. So you may not actually see a lot of traditional 5e type gridded battle maps here. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. This was 8 sessions. I'm going to try to call out where the session markers were as we go through. Let's go ahead and switch to my desktop screen though here, where we're starting out at the beginning of session 1. We started out in this essentially nowhere town that I called Silidar. Now, opening of the game, I delivered the cats, the concept, aim, and tone that we're going for the game. It's a concept from the Gauntlet, Jason Cordova, which I really like to just help communicate the setting to everyone. We go through that, and then we kick it off in Silidar. Now, I have the Vistani actually a presence in Silidar. All of my adventurers are here. They're for their own reasons that we kind of gloss over, and different adventurers kind of give their reasons for why they're here. The Vistani set up market actually in Silidar. They come here, they pick up supplies, and because they can leave the fog, they come here, they'll grab things, they interact with the locals as just their own community. They're known as the wanderers that they are. And while my PCs are all gathered in a tavern, I do the traditional openings. So Aragal, I believe his name was, walks in, delivers a letter, a forged letter from Kolyan and Dirovich, which is the call to adventure, seeking adventurers to help him in Barovia. So this is the Vistani. I had one of the leader of the Vistani. I had one of the characters actually have some interactions in a little pre-scene with the Vistani, so they could kind of know that they're a presence. They decide through their interaction with them that, yeah, okay, we'll accept, in a sort of meta conversation, we're going to accept the call to adventure. We're going to play this game that we all signed up for. But they also decide to trust the Vistani. They successfully convinced the Vistani to get a carriage ride to Barovia, which is kind of interesting. They mount up, they ride on the carriage, they leave the gates of Silidar. We have a really brief scene. I don't even know if I have it in the deal here anymore. It doesn't look like I do. I'm not going to dig for it too much, but there's one of these James RPG art scenes that I'll probably find in the replay I'm looking right at. It's actually right here. That's exactly what I was going to think when I got back. So we have this scene here, the Gates of Barovia. It's real quick, basically just a narrative scene of it opening. They leave and they get through. Now, because I'm running a lot of the traditional Ravenloft, there's an encounter that happens on the road to Barovia. So after we kind of have this brief scene here, the encounter on the road to Barovia is meant to essentially have a body kind of somewhere in this territory that the adventurers stumble across that contains the real letter that was to be sent to the adventurers. But because my characters are mounted on the carriage, they're not going to get that. So I start thinking of other alternatives. As they ride into Barovia, they see the fog, and the Vistani have these lanterns hanging out on the sides of their carriage. An idea that I got from somewhere. I think this might have been Professor Dungeon Master. It might have been some other people as well. But I liked the idea of these lanterns dispersing the fog that only the Vistani have. And so they kind of see as the light moves narratively, they see the fog closing in behind them, and that's starting to make them feel closed off. They continue up the road, and as they're in the tree line, I actually have them followed. I want to make them feel pressured right away, so I have them followed by a pack of wolves. I'm using tension. I'm trying to make them build. Are these wolves going to attack? Are we going to need to deal with this? They start increasing in numbers. Eventually, in kind of the later stage, I have a larger wolf that is a head or two taller than the others, a different color. I make it a really dark black, and I give it yellow eyes, and I have it have a more commanding demeanor. It's not as excited or ravenous as the others. It seems to be leading them like the apex, which they track. Now, the idea being, it's never communicated or established, but the idea being that this is Strahd, and the wolves get more and more ramped. But as they essentially get here in the opening and they near the Gates of Barovia, I have the wolves essentially back off and retreat to the tree line, and they just like stand in the tree line watching the player characters when we arrive in Barovia. So Barovia itself, this is another thing, naturally as you're covering these and you talk on videos, you forget to cover things. In my original video, I don't talk about it, but for the village of Barovia, I wanted to run it like traditional Ravenloft. I wanted to add a little bit more than traditional Ravenloft had, so I did add Donovich and Doru to Barovia. I did not add Death House. The reason being, I knew I wanted this to be at a pretty tight session budget, and Death House can take up a couple sessions, and it's also pretty lethal. I felt like with the players I had, the mentality they had, how new they were, if I sent them to Death House and lost them, that would really kill a lot of the mood and the motivation. If I added it, I would have a harder time meeting my time budget, so it just didn't make the cut for my game. And I think an investigative horror scene in Barovia was really more of a fit for my table, so that's what I did. Now, when the adventurers arrive in Barovia, it's actually pretty close to dark, so they need to find a place to sleep. As dark gets in Barovia, it's always dark, but it's close to midnight anyway. And they go to the Blood of the Vine Tavern. Some of them decide they're hungry. There's a couple people in the tavern. I have Ismark in there. Most of the party ends up staying, and one of them heads up to their room. Now, this is probably a good time, or the second best time other than the beginning, to cover what the party composition is. We end up having a paladin, a protection paladin. We have a monk, a way of the hand monk, a ranger hunter, and he establishes himself essentially as a monster hunter, vampire hunter. And we also have a warlock. So the warlock did do like a multi-classing. I mentioned I have him start at level 5. I did allow him to multi-class, so he kind of dipped into rogue a little bit. which ended up playing out kind of interesting. But the one who went upstairs was the warlock. His idea was, I'm going to go upstairs and I'm going to consult my patron. This was a great opportunity. It gave me the opportunity for him to go upstairs. I have him describe his ritual, and then I hit him with the, bam, call rejected. Something's weird about Barovia. You're outside of space and time. You can't communicate with your patron anymore, and so what the heck is going on? That was a good way to establish, all right, you're on your own, and another way to make them feel isolated. The characters downstairs have the conversation with Ismark, that they agree to actually go meet with him in the morning, to go meet with his sister, Irina. That he kind of has a charge. He gives the whole spiel. Irina's in danger. Strahd really, is obsessed with her, and our house is under assault every night. And they go, okay, well, if you come under assault tonight, we'll keep an eye out. They don't. But we'll come by in the morning and we'll help you. We'll meet your sister. And they all go to bed. The next day, they head out. I think we have a brief scene where they meet Mad Mary, and they get the kind of description that her daughter went missing and ran off, and they think, oh, okay, yeah, that's obviously Strahd. They think they're looking for a child, which is what I wanted to establish there. You have more about that in the original video I did. And then we head to the Burgomaster Mansion. So this scene, they clearly see the marks on the side. They can tell it's been under assault. They're trying to investigate and figure out what's going on. They talk to Irina. They manage to convince her to let them in. They get the whole deal, help me bury my father. Nobody in town will help me. Strahd's obsessed with me. Please help. The paladin, he decides that he's kind of indifferent to a lot of this. He actually suggests to Irina, why don't we just bury your father in the floorboards? And Irina does not take that very well, so I kind of tick that on the reputation. Irina is no longer very fond of the paladin after that interaction, rather insensitive interaction. However, the monk saves the day a little bit, turns her back towards the party, gets her agreeing with them, and they say, of course, we'll help you. Let's get this set up. We'll take them up to the church. We saw a church at the end of the road. We'll take them there. We'll talk to the father, and we'll get your father buried. And then we'll help you get out of here, get out from under Strahd's thumb, which is something that they were all kind of on board with to begin. So they become the pallbearers, and they have a procession. They all grab the coffin. They're moving up the streets of the town of Barovia, and they get the scene where they see everybody watching them and staying afar, just watching them move alone as, the entire town just stares at them creepily, and keeping their distance as they're not trying to draw the ire of Strahd, which helped set the mood a little more. We arrive at the church. They have the coffin, and the church is in a state of disrepair. They were not necessarily expecting this, I think. They see that the church is, nearly a condemned building. And they open the door. They see that all the lights are off. They hear the rain pattering, the dark clouds. They see a figure hunched in the back of the church. This is another one of Mike Schley's battle maps I pull in. We can kind of see it. I'll move it up here. But they see the figure here in praying at the back of the church. They see that the church is in a big state of disrepair. We have a little bit of a dungeon turn. I put them in initiative to make them make decisions about what they're going to do in this dark, ruined church. They see this figure like rocking and curled and muttering some sort of prayer that they hear. Switch this back to prefer looking at this while I talk. That's obviously Father Donovich. They creep up slowly, trying to figure out the nature. Like, is this human? Are we going to have a monster here? I think I was giving them really Left 4 Dead, type of vibes and callbacks in the way I was describing this. They were really careful in how they approached the father. They get up to him, and as they're looking, they see, okay, this is in fact someone who appears to be a man. He didn't attack me. And then boom, I have it happen. The like, Father, I'm so hungry, coming up from underneath the stairs, and that just tips the creepy factor. It switches the dial up, and they think, "Whoa, what the hell? Who do you have downstairs?" Father Donovich, sobbing mess. They have this conversation with Father Donovich being essentially just spiraled into himself, borderline insane. How are we going to get this guy to help us get Irina's father buried so we can get the hell out of here? They end up convincing him. The paladin ends up convincing him, hey, I'm a paladin. I'm a man of the Morning Lord. Not true, but he wins. He manages to convince him. I can go down there and I can do some things to help your son. They get a little bit of the story about Doru, a really half-true version of the story about Doru. If I will help you cure your son, if you help us bury Irina's father. Father Donovich agrees, kind of wipes the tears from his face. The monk, the warlock, and Father Donovich head around back, while the paladin and the hunter trace the sounds of the knocking to the trap door that is swollen shut from just soggy water. As they get close, they can the sound stops, which creeps them out even more. They manage to wedge the door open. They see nothing. They descend down into the darkness. They do both have dark vision, so they can kind of see in grayscale. But they descend down, and they see like a crouched figure behaving in the corner. I have him behave almost ghoul-like in moving on all fours, and I have him behaving in a way where he like really stays in the shadows, stays cornered, and I have him essentially just looking for an escape because they don't shut the door behind him. They see this figure. They're trying to figure out what to do. After a little bit, I have Doru decide that his number one priority is to get out the door, but they're blocking it. So the only reason Doru attacks is because they are physically blocking the exit, and he makes a swipe at them as they're trying to get by. They decide not to let him out, and they continue to block him, root him in place. They end up slaying Doru, and they rip a makeshift stake off of some of the eroded, weathered wooden posts down there in the basement, and they stake Doru. They dig a hole. They bury him in the basement. They wipe the sweat from their brow, and they think, all right, well, let's get out of here. They head up to go join the funeral. By the time they get there, I have essentially the hole's been dug. Irina's father's been lowered into the hole. They're saying a quick prayer. They join the funeral like nothing happened. Once the funeral is over, they break the news to Father Donovich. Hey, we took care of your son. Oh, he's healed? No, actually, we by take care of, we mean we killed him and buried him in the basement. Now, this naturally sends Father Donovich into a self-destructive spiral. He runs off wailing in a fit of mania into the church, and they just hear like screaming, crying, insane yelling. He devolves again, and they just kind of shrug their shoulders. We got what we wanted. His father's buried. Let's get the hell out of Dodge. They work it out with Ismark and Irina. Hey, we need to get somewhere. Where can we go? Now, I don't have any other villages in my game, but still I say, well, there's a town Vallaki up the road. And if we can get out there, maybe we can continue. We can get out of Strahd's domain. We just need to run. I don't know where we're going to go, but we can't stay here. They agree, and they say, okay, well, we're going to go get some supplies. We're going to figure some stuff out. We'll meet you at the mansion, and then we'll take off. They head into town, and what they're looking for in town is they try to find some holy symbols. So this is where the fate mechanic came in. I did bring up Mythic, and I did ask the fate question. I put it extremely unlikely, very unlikely, mostly because why would there be an abundance of holy symbols in Strahd's domain? He has like total dominion over this place. He's not going to allow holy symbols to just be floating around freely to where you can pick them up off the shelf at the local, corner market. It's not a thing that's going to be able to happen. They couldn't find any. They decided to make another stake off of some rotten fence posts in the village. They go to the local store. They see some prices. They have a little bit of a back and forth where they decide, hey, this is, robbery. What the heck are going on with these prices? All right, we can't afford anything. The only things we have are what we have on our back and we brought with us. Let's just go get Irina and leave. So this is a kind of the cutoff point for session 1. Pretty good. We got through the introduction. We got to Barovia. They met a couple key characters. They had a combat scene with Father Donovich and Doru, and we have a driving factor for them moving forward, which is excellent. That's really what I want in a game at the end of a session. Players are hooked. They're all excited, and they're ready for the next game. So what's going on in session 2? Session 2 starts out with them leaving Barovia. We do the River Ivlis crossing. I don't even think I go to this scene because I don't really have a plan for them right outside of Barovia. So the very first scene we do is actually going to be at the River Ivlis crossroads. And this is where I bring in the scene from Curse of Strahd that has a illusion hanging from the gallows, where they essentially see they see a body hanging. They walk past it. They see the little graveyard. I did have some encounters planned if they messed with those, but they ended up deciding not to. But one of them, and I had them essentially roll a die and low roll, turns around and they see their own body hanging from the gallows, that classic illusion. They spend a little bit of time trying to figure it out. As they hang out here, I have crows, ravens, start accumulating in the trees and just building. So as they're talking to each other, I just keep popping in. You see another, a small murder of ravens join the amassing crowd of ravens hanging in the tree. The cawing is getting louder and louder. It starts making them real uncomfortable. They decide, we don't know what's going on. We're going to get out of here. They decide to take the road closest to the river to go towards Tesserpool. And the entire time I have them moving, I just have them followed by these ravens. So I take a couple of opportunities to just describe that the ravens are just constantly watching them. More of them are accumulating and just following them as they move up the road. So I have these being the spies for the Brides of Strahd, which I have plans for coming up. But they don't engage the ravens. The ravens don't engage them. Just makes them feel followed and makes them feel like, all right, we're not going to turn around. They move up the road and we arrive at the Tesserpool encampment. This place, we're going to have a good scene here, is what I'm thinking here in session 2. They show up. They see the Vistani wagons. They're still on okay terms with the Vistani. They don't trust them, but they don't think they're enemies either. So they see these, they see the encampment here. They recognize, all right, it's going to get dark soon. We don't want to be wandering around. Let's go talk to them. They've been accommodating before. They go up to the fire. They share some stories. It's a good time to mention here that not all of them actually approach the fire. The ranger decides to actually stay hidden in the bushes and provide overwatch. He's thinking, all right, I don't know if we can trust them. Just in case something goes wrong, I'm going to stay here. The other thing is I've kind of got an eye on those wagons, he's thinking. Maybe I can get a hold of one of those lamps to push the fog away, because we're trying to get out of Barovia. We need to get through the other gate. We need a plan for the fog, so we need one of those lanterns. The paladin and the warlock and the monk hanging out around the fire. They tell stories, they share food, they share drink. They're having some of the wine. I give them a couple of the rumors that you can deliver that the Vistani know from Curse of Strahd. And after I give them a couple rumors and some stories, I do the Madame Ava introduction. I say, hey, Madame Ava's in the tent. She would actually appreciate talking to you. This surprised me because this is an iconic moment, something I prepared for the tarot reading, but the paladin and the warlock decide not to follow or go to Madame Ava. Only the monk agrees. So I do the tarot reading for the monk alone as she enters this scene with Madame Ava. While outside, the paladin and the warlock sharing stories, the paladin decides he wants to give a big storytelling from his past. He does a performance role. Role's excellent, so he's got everybody just totally sucked into his story. The monk is inside getting the tarot reading, and during this time period of the tarot reading, which I'll get to, the ranger makes a move. The ranger decides he's going to sneak down to one of the wagons. He's going to try to look inside, see if he can find one of the lanterns and steal it and get back into the bushes. So the paladin's story is essentially providing cover for that. He ends up being able to do that, to get a hold of the lantern and sneak back into the brush. And we'll revisit that in a minute. So the tarot reading, the way I decided to run this is I fixed the tarot cards. I decided where each item was going to be in Ravenloft in order to provide incentive. If you watch the original video, you'll also know that I had the items that are in the tarot reading, the artifacts. When the players found each one of them, they would level up and get the benefits of rest. So that's another factor in this. A lot of the tarot card readings from Curse of Strahd obviously have locations for them that are not in my game, as they're not within the boundaries of the original Ravenloft module, which was another reason that I kind of fixed it. So she gets the tarot reading. I have the Sun Sword be delivered to them here by Madame Eva right away. And the other items for the Amulet of Ravenkind, I have that be in the throne room. I have the Tome of Strahd be in Strahd's tomb. I have the final battle with Strahd is going to occur in Sergei's tomb. And the favored enemy is, of course, Irina. So they get that. They come back out. The ranger's back in the bushes now, has a lamp. The monk comes out to the fire and actually gives the sun sword to the paladin. The paladin attunes to the sword, and being the sun sword is sentient, and it can communicate emotion, I have it also add visions. So when he attunes to the sword, he gets a flashback scene to really help set some of the history of Ravenloft, bury them in the world a little more, where he sees Strahd and Sergei. He gets some scenes showing the jealousy that they have, like a fight. He gets the scene from the Tome of Strahd where the sun sword is destroyed by Strahd and shattered, and he gets that feeling of just vengeance that the sun sword has for Strahd, combined with those visions to really just tell the story in a really oblique way and help them get more invested in just the world and the history of the land. So during this scene, them trying to move Irina, they're trying to get Irina out of the boundaries of the game that I've set up. So how am I going to solve that? Well, I knew I wanted to get Irina away from them. They also at this point don't really have a strong like in-game reason to help Irina. It's kind of weak. They're mostly going along with it because they know that's the nature of the module. So I need to take Irina away, but I want to do it mechanically. I don't just want her to poof in between games or me make it not work. I want to give them a scene they can interact with. I want them to lose Irina, not just have her taken. So this is a good time for the brides. I take Ludmilla and I take Anastasia. I believe I have those two here. Let me see if I can find them real quick. We got Strahd. Here we go. Here's Anastasia and Ludmilla, who I always put an A in there for some reason. But these two show up with Rahadin and the Black Carriage. They've been spying on the party due to the ravens, with the ravens, so they know about them being around. And their idea being, we're going to retrieve Irina for Strahd. They show up in the carriage. They're vampires. They have excellent stealth. The ranger fails his stealth roll, and I have him then roll for being charmed. He then hears a voice talk to them, and this is Anastasia, and he fails his defense against the charm, and he becomes instantly charmed by Anastasia, who then hangs out with them in the bushes there. He gets the scene. He sees the Black Carriage. He sees the Dusk Elf, Rahadin. I believe I have them call him out by name. just kind of sitting silently atop the carriage, driving it. So while Anastasia hangs out with the ranger in the bushes, Ludmilla moves up to the fire. As she approaches the fire, she has a brief conversation with them, and each time she's talking, I'm making them roll against the charm defense as they're trying to figure out who this person is. The monk and the paladin fail their charm rolls as well. The warlock succeeds at resisting, so he is not charmed, but Irina also fails the charm roll. Ludmilla has the conversation, talks to them. The Vistani are already deferential to Strahd and the vampires. It's at this point where the player characters are now convinced the Vistani essentially work for Strahd, even though they're nice to him. So Ludmilla tells Irina, beckons her, hey, you're going to come with us. We need to get you ready for your wedding because Strahd's going to marry you. And they see this, but they're essentially defenseless. And Ludmilla begins walking away. With the back turned, the warlock decides, I'm going to try to do something. I can't just let this happen. I'm the only one that can do anything. I'm going to attack her. And he tries to cast a spell that Ludmilla counterspells. I just have her kind of wave her hand, counterspell it. And I also kind of communicate to them, you're level 5. You can see that there's other vampires up in the woods now. Presumably anyway, they could see the carriage, and they know above table that they have their friend. And he decides not to press the matter any further. But this really sunk the hooks. As they're leaving, Anastasia gives an invitation to the dinner for Strahd to the ranger as they mount up in the black carriage, and they leave with Irina. So the PCs lose Irina here. We also end the session around here. And I think that this scene, them actually losing Irina in a frustrating mechanical way, I think that really helped actually get them to care about retrieving Irina, as the rest of the game became about them. All right, we need to get Irina. We need to do something about this. We can't just let her fall under the grip of Strahd. We agreed to help her. So that was a good move. I liked that. All right, take another drink here. Been talking for a minute, so my throat's a little dry. I don't think coffee's going to help. All right. Next session, the road to Ravenloft. We return to the Overland map. We got the land of Barovia. They decide to continue. We have a really brief scene, forgettable. I'd wonder if my characters even remember, but I do have the Vistani wagons come up behind them as they're at the bridge, loaded up with supplies. Clearly packed to the guild. I have the Vistani throw some mockery at them as they ride by, and they can see that it's loaded with food and drink. They can hear the jostle of it as they get the scene with the waterfall. They pass the gate again, and they come to the black carriage. So when they see the black carriage, they recognize it. The ranger in particular recognizes it as the same one. They go up and they investigate it. They look inside. It's empty. Nothing's there. But the door is open, and it's got the horses attached to it. They talk about it for a minute, but they ultimately decide rather quickly, all right, there's no way in hell we're getting in that thing. We don't trust Strahd. He's our enemy. We're not getting in this thing. And they take off. They continue up the road, and we arrive at the actual gates of Ravenloft. Let me grab the scene. Looking for it. Of course, it takes a minute to find anything. But we go to our classic scene here where they arrive at the gates of Ravenloft, and they see the drawbridge. They can tell from the description that the drawbridge is not in great shape. They test their way across a bit. I do keep the rolls in for the bridge, and one of them actually almost gets knocked off by the wind, but they succeed on their dex save to recover, which I allow them, able to grab the chain, pull themselves up, and as they're crossing the bridge, I have them just hear the stomping of the hooves and the rattle of the carriage wheels from the black carriage that is coming just storming up the road behind them. So they rush through the gate as the carriage comes blowing across the drawbridge, And this is where we enter into the dungeon crawl part of the game. So we switch gears. As I mentioned, I mentioned this map is slow to load. You're going to see that firsthand here as we just watch this churn along. There we go. All right, let's get on the right level and let's cover what happens when they show up. They get across the drawbridge. They decide, all right, we see the doors are open. We can kind of hear the organ music coming through the main area, but there's no way in hell we're going to dinner. We're not going that way. They'd seen the carriage peel south. They decide to follow it. They get to the portcullis here. They lift it up. They move through to the back. They spend some dungeon turns looking around. They peek in. They see this is a chapel. They spend some time in the garden. They spend more time out here on the overlook. There's a really great overlook scene that it's over here, but I'm not going to switch because it takes so much time to load this scene. But they have a conversation. They're trying to decide what to do. Where are we going to go? They spend a lot of time talking. I figure out, all right, I need something to actually push these guys inside. They come back down and they decide to come back through the portcullis. And I decide to have wolves show up. So I fill the front courtyard with wolves. As they have the portcullis open and one of them through, they see like a pack of wolves around the corner and start charging them. So they run back through, they drop the gate and stop it as the wolves just like bash against it, like teeth gnashing at the bars. And they think, okay, we're trapped. There's no way we can go. There's a big cliff over there. The only place left we can go is inside the castle, which is perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to happen. I didn't want them feeling like they could go wherever they want. They head inside the chapel. We spend some time exploring the chapel here. They can see the figures on the balcony up above, which are hard to describe in this scene, but the second floor has the two like slumped shadowed figures up there. They see the figure at the end on the altar. They spend some time messing around with it. Ultimately, they get a hold of the icon of Ravenloft, and they continue to hear the music bellow. They do explore... Oops, that's the wrong direction. They do come upstairs. They explore this area a little bit. They check out the figures, and they recognize that they're slumped over. I just have them be essentially dead. And they check out this hallway where the like dummy vampire comes swooping down after them. After seeing that, they actually just turn around. They decide, all right, we're going to head back down, and we're going to decide what to do next time, because by the time we're at this point, they wasted so much time exploring the courtyard that the session was over. Next session, they regroup. It's been about an hour in game in this session. They decide, you know what? Let's follow the music and let's see what's going on. We hear this obvious vampiric organ music coming up the hall. Let's just go see what Strahd has to say. Since it's been so long since the dinner was supposed to happen, because they refused the carriage invitation, it took them extra time to walk here. They spent an hour or more wandering around the outside of the castle. They didn't go straight to dinner. I decide, all right, they missed opportunity to have dinner. I had the plan to have the key players in the castle, all the brides, Escher, Gertruda, and just introduce the cast over a dinner scene. That was what I was going to do. But they wasted so much time that didn't make sense. They aren't going to stick around for an extra 4 hours, a bunch of monsters that don't eat, waiting for adventurers that aren't going to show up. They go back to do their own thing. So when they show up in the dining room, having pushed back down to the chapel, coming through the main area, they come into the dining room and they get the original Ravenloft, where Strahd stays at the organ. They're invited to sit and eat. Strahd has a conversation with them, delivers a bit more lore about the castle and his history and how he built it. Some of them eat the food, most of them don't. But through their interactions, the paladin and the hunter in particular are rude and pointed and direct to Strahd and challenging to him, which I have Strahd respond to poorly. So they ended up kind of pissing off Strahd a little bit. Strahd blows out all the lights and disappears. They light their torch, and they think that he must have gone through a trapdoor because they didn't go through him. So they actually search the organ, and they find the trapdoor. They push through. They see the Hall of Mirrors in here. They spend some time exploring this empty space. They push through the cobwebs into the stairwell. They move down into here. They move down into this area, into the barracks where they have a fight with the reanimated skeletons of Strahd's guards. We have this fight. They take out the skeletons, and this is where this session ends. We spent a lot of time on the dinner that I abridged. But after this fight, between the dinner and this fight, we exhausted the 3-hour session, and we cut. All right. We're actually in the castle, though. We're in the castle, and we're moving around. So the next session. I don't know what number we're on, but doesn't matter. They move into this room where Cyrus has been doing arts and crafts. So they've got the bone table. They actually have this Hall of Bones scene from James RPG art. There's not really a ton in here for them to interact with, but they definitely get the creepiness of it. They decide to push east. Now, when they move into K62, I have them presented with the dark hallway. They got the fog that's covering like 3 feet of the ground, and they just see a shambling, hunched over figure that is Cyrus Bellevue at the end of the hall. They can see light and smell just a really terrible smell coming from K65, and I have Cyrus Bellevue just do like a weird rushed scurry up the hall. I'm trying to bait them. They don't take the bait, and they get greeted by Cyrus. They talk to him. I have Cyrus be kind of mad that they missed dinner. Them kind of peeking through the door in here. They're, not too sure that they're happy. Like they're kind of happy they didn't make dinner. Cyrus tries baiting them into the elevator trap room. They don't take the bait, but they do see the key that he hangs around his neck, and the paladin makes a move, succeeds, grabs it, and yanks it off. Cyrus is kind of pissed, goes back. They see like a zombie arm come out of the cauldron. I think I got this from Professor Dungeon Master too, but I'm not sure. But they see like a zombie arm come up out of the cauldron, and they see Cyrus like smack it with a big oar that he's using to stir it and push it down in, and they kind of get the heebie-jeebies. They search this junk pile for a little bit and find nothing. They look at this room, but don't go into it with the casks of wine. And they ultimately just decide that they're not going to go the way that Cyrus was really desperate to make them go. I had Cyrus not be very convincing. But regardless, they decide they're not going to go this way. They come back up and they push into this room, and they push into Rahadin. They have a fight with Rahadin. They take a lot of damage. They decide to use the icon of Ravenloft. They learn about its healing properties when they activate it. And they defeat Rahadin here early. A little bit underwhelming the way I ran him. I probably could have done it better. But okay, they won. That's fine. And we have them push up the stairs, where they find themselves at the base of the Heart of Sorrow. Now they can see the glowing coming from up high on the Heart of Sorrow. That captures their attention. I think they maybe spend a little bit of time exploring this, decide it's empty, and they head all the way up the Heart of Sorrow, straight to the top, where we get presented with this. But I have a better scene from Heart of Sorrow where we look at the deal here. Now, this is the UDT map and some of my characters here. They fight they decide they're going to destroy this thing pretty much right away. They attack it. Halberds come off the walls. And at about the halfway point, I have the third wife, Valenta Popovsky, the crazy one. She shows up. So Valinta Popovsky shows up with a 1d4 vampire spawn to join the fight, complicate things. They're still having a hard time with all the animated swords. I think the monk gets knocked down. The tower's pitching and swaying. They're constantly making saves. The warlock has failed to save a couple of times or once and had to use his misty step to recover and get back on the ledge. But our time ran out in the middle of this kind of epic fight. The Rangers grappled at the end of the fight by one of the vampire spawn. They're split. They're desperate. They're on their back foot. They're trying to win. We end the session there. Now, the next session when we come back, one of our players couldn't join us. So the Ranger ended up having another thing they needed to do. So what did we end up do? How did we handle this? I had the vampire that had the Ranger grappled anyway. They both fail their roll for the tower pitching. They and the vampire takes him down the tower shaft. I don't really worry about the fall damage because it's, I needed it narratively, to be quite honest. They do manage to kill Valinta here, but they do not stake her. So she mists up and they see her mist go down the tower. The idea being it's returning to her coffin after a round or two. They dispatch the Heart of Sorrow. They kill the rest of the halberds. The vampire spawn are either dead or have fled. And they decide, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to push up the tower further, where they arrive at the tower's spire. Oh, that's not what I want. I want the North Tower peak. They arrive in this room where they see like the rusted manacles hanging from the walls, this really gross bed with straps on it and a chest. They open the chest and they find some treasure in there. I briefly considered putting an item in here, but it would have gone against the tarot reading, and they hadn't found any yet. They're starting to think, where the heck are these items? We've been in the castle for a while. We haven't seen anything we need. Where are the catacombs? Oh, I guess they're probably in the basement, and we're climbing up a tower. We probably need to change our strategy. But we're almost at the top. So they push up the trapdoor. When they get up there, they get the scene where the clouds form. A bat swarm starts flying at them out of the clouds. The clouds form into the face of Strahd, a la Dracula. They deduce, Strahd's really pissed at us because we killed his wife. Reasonable deduction. In reality, I'm planning for Strahd to marry Irina. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do that. So I'm starting to think about, all right, I'm going to pull in the Wedding at Ravenloft module. Valinta was kind of a jealous bride. So I have Strahd being kind of annoyed that the adventurers killed her physical form, but they did not stake her, so she's not gone. And Strahd's thinking, all right, well, she was probably going to create problems for my wedding to my beautiful Tatiana anyway. So this is actually a matter of convenience for me. I'm not going to revoke guest rights yet. That's what Strahd's thinking. Characters, however, think Strahd is irate, which that's fine by me. They push down. They get onto the main breezeway. We're going to have this long loading scene again. Yep. Takes forever. Here we go. Not breezeway, but bridge. They push across the bridge. They all make their saves. And they head down these stairs. I need to open levels again. When they head down the stairs, they move into the room with the cats. They see all the green eyes in the dark. They see these cats just staring at them. And the paladin decides to talk to animals. And I roll a reaction roll to figure out how the cats are going to behave. They behave, and he gets a great roll that the cats essentially don't care that they're there. But I also have them have animal intelligence. So what he kind of gathers is, oh, they know you're here. You know, they're going to know you're here. And who's they? Oh, our masters, of course. And the cats don't tell them very much, but they do tell them that their presence is known. They push back. The cats are indifferent, don't attack. They move into the room here with all the alchemical supplies. They root around it a little bit. They see the drag marks on the floor to the trapdoor, but they don't actually search and discover the trapdoor. instead preferring to just push into this room, which is apparently empty because the witches all know that they're coming. The witches are all invisible, standing in the corners, just watching them. But the power word to activate the cauldron has already been used. So they see the cauldron bubbling, they can smell it, and they see all the stools, and they're thinking something weird is up. There's nowhere else to go. One of them decides to just come back in this room, just grab something, and they're going to come back and they try to pitch it into the cauldron, toss it in. At that point, I have the witches deciding, actually, this is a really sensitive mixture. We don't want them just adding whatever. One of them comes on, removes their invisibility, grabs a wrist, prevents them from throwing something in the pot. All the witches drop their invisibility, and they realize they're surrounded and outnumbered. They quickly change their tune. They're trying to figure out how to negotiate. Are we going to TPK here in this room with the witches? The warlock has a good idea. The warlock decides, I reach into my pouch and I pull out a vial of sand from one of the planes of hell that was gifted to me by my patron. We make the fate roll. He gets an excellent roll. He succeeds. So yes, he has a vial of hell sand. Now the Barovian witches are constant seekers of power. What can they do with the vial of hell sand? I'm starting to have ideas. They are excited about it. They make the trade. They trade their lives for the hell sand. As soon as it's over, the witches basically stop caring that the adventurers are around. They're running over to the books. They're flipping through the books and looking things up and, grab, aha. They're arguing about how to do things. One of them runs out into the alchemical room, starts rooting through supplies, and like, yes, found it. They're getting things together. They're adding new things to the mixture, and they throw the hell sand into the pot. They don't know what the hell's going to happen. They decide to leave and head downstairs. Now, I really liked this because I mentioned in the previous session, Rahadin went down in a way I wasn't totally happy with. So I'm thinking, all right, the witches and Ludmilla are going to collude. They're going to create some sort of like corruption monster. This hell sand is going to mix with all the stuff in here. It's going to create a concoction that when fed to somebody creates this like xenomorph, like Marvel Venom type corrupted creature. And they're going to feed it to Rahadin. And Rahadin's going to reanimate, not unlike the mountain in Game of Thrones. And when things get really out of hand, he's going to, tear off his shell and he's going to come out as the Rahadin the Blightborn, which I have essentially as a reskinned Steel Guardian, slightly lower AC, but a formidable monster that can kind of terrorize them and chase them through the castle. So that's what I plan to do with it. The players don't know. The players that have played with me before know that there's going to be some consequence, that hell sand and witches are not going to combine in a way that's favorable for them, but they don't have anything to do. So they push down the stairs. They have a fight here with Strahd's portrait and the rug. They manage to defeat both, and they push into the room here, the lounge area, K49. They meet Escher laying on the couch, and this is where we end the session with Escher greeting them in, essentially a nonchalant way, laying on the couch. And like many people, I'm sure I kind of play him up like he's essentially just Astarion from Baldur's Gate. And I felt like that was appropriate, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who's chosen to do that. All right. Get another drink here, talk for a while. Oh my, yeah, gonna be a long video. All right. We start out the next session. They interact with Escher. Escher has a scene with them and then says, hey, I need you to actually get your buddy out of the guest room because we need it for the bridal shower. Now, you'll remember in the previous session, I had the ranger and the vampire spawn fall off the tower. So they land on the bottom. Offline, I delivered to this player. I recognize by this point that they're having a hard time finding the artifacts in the castle. They don't know where the rooms are. They don't know where the throne room is. The only thing they've kind of deduced is that the catacombs are on the bottom of the castle underneath, and they don't want to go there until they're ready to fight Strahd, and they're not ready to fight Strahd till they find any items. I briefly decide to put the Tome of Strahd in here. Ultimately, decide not to. I maybe should have, to be honest, but I didn't. The thing that I deliver to the Ranger offline is I deliver to him a set of narrative scenes of him getting dragged from the bottom of the stairs at the Heart of Sorrow through to the main corridor, up the main stairs, through the throne room, through the room full of books with the accountant, up the stairs, into here, and into the bedroom. So he gets this kind of like unconscious fading in and out type scene. He has Ludmilla started out being like, stop feeding on him. I have plans for him after what he's done to Rahadin. Take him to the guest room. And we started out with him waking up in this bed after having had that unconscious sequence. And he feels a presence around him, but he's not totally conscious yet. But he feels like something or someone's in the room with him. I have the PCs open the door, find their friend. What they see is they see a floating vial of just like black liquid about to be poured into the hunter's mouth. The hunter makes his save. They react and chase this thing. As soon as the door blows open, the liquid drops, hits the floor, and this door slams shut. And whatever entity it was. Now, of course, it was an invisible Barovian witch. They don't know that, though. That goes up the trapdoor. The others, the paladin pursues through the door, looks around inside. He doesn't figure out the trap, even though it's got a pretty much the answer in the description. He doesn't figure it out, and he fails his roll. So the entity's just gone, and he's satisfied it's gone after swinging his sword around a little bit. They see the black ichor on the floor that I have kind of just like grasping, like with little pseudopod tentacles trying to reach anything living to corrupt them. They decide to destroy it with fire. While they're in here, I have Ludmilla, Rahadin, and Anastasia and Irina show up and enter the main area. So they're all in the guest chamber, and then through the door, they hear the voices of Anastasia and Ludmilla. And Rahadin the Blightborn is there, but he doesn't say anything. They come out. They have a brief conversation. Rahadin's just hanging out in the corner. Irina is with them, and they recognize that. They're talking to them, and then they have a brief moment where the monk and Irina are able to share whispers, essentially. Irina shares, hey, kill me. Don't let me be turned into a vampire. And the monk agrees, and they're kind of figure out that Irina's playing along. Her charm is dropped, and she heads into the chamber, into the bed chamber with Anastasia. So we have Ludmilla and Rahadin out here with Escher. Escher's been nice up to this point, kind of not really mean, and just talking to them. Hey, we missed you at dinner. Sad we didn't get to meet you. I have in the background already decided that Strahd is coming up to the bridal chamber, despite it being bad luck, to refresh his charm on Irina before the wedding. By the time we're at this stage of the game, it is about 11 o'clock at night. I have the wedding happening at midnight, as I mentioned. That's the doom clock. So they also hear and learn from Escher, hey, the guests are arriving. They hear the drawbridge going down. They see the carriages, like convoy of people moving in from around Barovia. I bring them all in. I bring in the Strahd and Ludmilla, because Ludmilla's in charge of security, brings in werewolves and activates some of the whites as security. Anastasia's in charge of the wedding planning, so she's working with Irina, getting her in the bridal chamber. They're setting up the dress and makeup, all that stuff in the guest room. And the Were-Ravens are also there as guests. Strahd doesn't know they're there. All of this comes from the Wedding at Ravenloft module to prepare to run a wedding, which is what I was planning to do to give opportunity for it. But the players had other plans, as we will see. So as soon as Ludmilla kind of dismisses herself. They've been sharing some wine on the table. I've established that there's a jug and there's some glasses of wine that they've been drinking while they talk. Ludmilla leaves. That's one down. Rahadin's still kind of just hanging out. They decide, all right, we're actually going to attack. They attack Escher and Anastasia immediately. They start having a fight. They're trying to get Irina into the main room. One round later, as I mentioned, Strahd shows up, and Rahadin does his essentially corrupted evolution mode and bursts out of his Dusk Elf form into his Rahadin the Blightborn form. Let me see if I got the picture here just to kind of communicate that. Yeah, here's the art. He turns into this monstrosity that the witches have turned him into, which has the attributes of a Steel Guardian, slightly lower AC, but it's got like the Dimension Door and the Teleport activations and just a boatload of HP, and it hits and bites really hard. They're in this fight for their life. Strahd shows up, they grab Irina, and they dive out the window. Now they all make their saves, and we have a fight out here on the rooftop. They manage to, some of them out here with Irina, manage to start trying to flee. Rahadin pursues. He has excellent grip on the roof. Strahd also pursues. One or two of them stay in here, and they kill Anastasia. Escher's trying to defend it when they kill Anastasia, and it's clear that she's gone. They get pushed, and Anastasia ends up misting up. As soon as Anastasia mists up because they fail to stake her, Escher decides to run, and he dives out the window and runs up the battlement. Strahd out on the rooftop. I think the PC's plan was just to grab Irina and run out the front gate, which is not something I was going to allow to happen. The doesn't take very long. Strahd gets a hold of her, and he uses an activated ability from the Wedding at Ravenloft where he uses one of his layer actions that were given just to demonstrate the level of command he has over the realm or the plane of Barovia. He grabs the moon and he throws a full moon in the sky. Now, Strahd's thinking, all right, these adventurers, this is too far. I'm sick of them. No more guest rights. I'm going to activate my werewolves. He throws the full moon in the sky. He doesn't know that the were-ravens are also there. So every werewolf in the castle, every were-raven in the castle, all turn into their were form. The PCs are out here on the roof fighting for their lives against Rahadin and Strahd. They hear just fierce, violent cacophony of animal noises coming from the ground level. They hear the howls and the screeching of birds. They hear the screams of innocents of Barovia as they're being slaughtered in the mayhem. It is total chaos. Strahd, unexpectedly, he has a look of confusion on his face, like what the hell just happened? He's got a hold of Irina, so he runs back through the window, takes Irina down the stairs. Escher has already fled up the battlement. The party is tired of making saves on the roof. They're worried about falling off and running out of luck, so they decide to run back inside. They fight Rahadin, the Blightborn creature. They manage to kill him, although they do almost lose the monk in this fight, but not quite. I have this wine be a little bit of GM Fiat. They're able to take a drink and restore some hit dice. I think there were 3 drinks in there. Just to keep them buffed up a little bit. And now they've lost Irina. They managed to kill Rahadin. And they decide, all right, what are we going to do? Session's over here. All right, let's get another drink of water. We're moving into the penultimate session now. It's the penultimate session. Also, another session where a player couldn't make it. The hunter, again, had other business to attend to, but the show must go on. So when we rejoin, and the beginning of the session is them actually killing Rahad and the Blightborn, they push down the stairs here, pursuing Strahd. They come down to this level. We actually totally bypass this level. They push straight down the stairs again. I didn't want to burn more time in the castle, so I let them know that Strahd pushed down further. It was like they could see light moving. They come down, they reach this level here, and they see this door swinging. And as they come into K30, there's a accountant in here whose name I forget at the moment, but they see him dead on the floor. And he's got fang marks in the side of his neck. I had Strahd feed on him to restore his hit points from the previous fight. They kick a few chests around, but they hear just chaos and commotion coming from K25. They kind of, waffle around in here a little bit, trying to decide what to do. They're not making a move. So what I decide to have happen is there's werewolves and were-ravens fighting in K25. I had this room set up as the reception hall. So prior to the wedding, all of the guests, or many of the guests, are in K25 just mingling, doing pre-wedding stuff. Vistani are on the stairs. There's people packed all over the ground floor in the main area, in the main hallway, just waiting for the ceremony to start at midnight. So when Strahd threw the moon in the sky, everyone transforms into the throne. It's a total brawl in there now. So they just hear commotion, clanging, fighting, animal noises. They're not making a move, so the door blows open, and in falls a full-size were-raven who's got a big gash down the chest. It falls and collapses, apparently dead, on the floor. As the door opens, they're able to see that this is clearly the throne room. And they also see tables overturned, chairs, dead innocents on the floor, full werewolves and were-ravens in combat. But most notably that it's the throne room. The warlock decides, I'm going to go invisible. He goes invisible. He sneaks inside. And he finds the Amulet of Ravenkind by the throne. While he's in here, he gets a better picture that he sees the werewolves and the were-ravens fighting each other. He also sees a woman in here fighting. This is Esmeralda, but he doesn't know that yet. But he sees them, and he comes back into the K30 with the amulet, shares what he saw. They're trying to figure out what's going on because they don't know where anything was going on in the castle. And as they're talking, trying to figure out what to do, trying to make a plan, I have the were-raven. It's been a couple turns. So the were-raven's wounds heal and it rises to its feet. They are now in a room with a full-size were-raven who's reaching at its hilt. They're not sure what move to make. And they try talking to it. The were-raven can't speak in were-raven form, so it just caws back. Paladin talks to animals. Ultimately, through the conversation, they decide, we don't know who you are. You don't know who I am. But we both hate Strahd, and that's good enough. So he pushes through the door, leaving the party alone to go rejoin the fight. The party decides to come in and help. They slay the werewolves. They help the were-ravens. They meet Esmeralda briefly in combat. The were-ravens and Esmeralda push down the stairs. The party decides not to pursue as they hear more and more commotion. They just know it's another big fight downstairs. And ultimately, they learn from Esmeralda that Strahd didn't actually come through here. He entered the room, but he turned around. So I'm using Strahd as essentially a mechanism to drive them to where they need to go so we don't have to play several more sessions here. We can stay on target. They push back down the stairs. On the ground floor, they have a brief scene where they see Strahd's armor essentially walking through, dragging his sword, and take a big swing at a were-raven. So more fighting. They decide not to engage. They push down the stairs further. They push past this, and they end up in K73 with the prison room. So in here, this was probably one of the more fun engagements, I think, of the castle. They come in, they trip the teleporter traps. So the paladin is the first one who comes in. He trips the teleporter. He ends up down here in this cell. The others, because of the way this works, if I actually drag a couple tokens, let me grab some of my adventurers and just kind of show you how this ended up working. Let's put the paladin here, and let's just grab the hunter. So the paladin comes up. He's looking like this. He trips a trap. Now the paladin ends up over here, and this gate's shut. This gate's shut. So the others in this hallway, they don't know where he went. He just vanishes. The paladin's over here stuck in a cell. He manages to break this door open with brute strength, but he hears a voice. There's another werewolf in here well, is expected to be a human, but as all the werewolves have transformed, he is now a werewolf. So when the paladin bursts out and kind of stumbles into the hallway, he's had a brief like prison conversation with this other person. The werewolf also bursts out, and they're standing each other face. Now the paladin thinks he's alone with the werewolf, and the draws his sun sword, prepares to fight, starts fighting. Those in the hallway out here, they just hear commotion coming from the south. So they push down, they open the door, they help fight the werewolf, but they're making a ton of noise. So I have the zombies over here from the torture chamber in K76 start shambling over. The warlock recognizes that they're coming. He sets up a defense. The monk and them push back. As they're fighting, the warlock manages to trip one of the teleports and ends up in a cell up here. They fight the zombies, kind of afraid to move due to the teleporters. The zombies trip a couple of the teleporters. We have a cool scene where the warlock, and he's not strong enough to break the door open by himself. So the warlock and one zombie end up in the same cell that the warlock has to fight by himself. Another zombie ends up landing in a cage up here. They kill the others. They check it out for a while. There's more loot than they can carry in here. They kill the zombie in here just for spite reasons. And they decide, all right, I decide to show some mercy with the teleporter traps that they kind of figured out where they are after tripping them so many times. They push into the torture chamber and they climb the balcony. They end up in K78. Now, this is a puzzle room with the brazier and the stones. And two big statues, and there's like a big hourglass up high. I read them the riddle that's on the stones. They quickly grab the green stone, which said something about coffins, and they throw it into the fire, and the monk, without hesitation, just sticks her arm into the fire and poof, vanishes. It takes the others a little bit longer to decide. They test it, like they throw a book through the fire to see if any object will go through. It doesn't, because only creatures go through. They see the clock ticking. I turn up the pressure on the narrative. They both decide, all right, we're going to join our friend. They stick their hands in the fire. So the riddle for the green stone actually has them show up in the coffin maker shop, which is not in my game. So I decide it's close enough. They kind of communicated to me that their expectation was that the answer to that riddle was they would show up in Strahd's tomb. That was clear to me from context. So that's what I have happen because it makes sense and it pushes the game forward. So they show up. We move over. They show up in K86 in Strahd's tomb. They see the coffin in the middle. They see the Tome of Strahd laying at the base, so they find both the Amulet of Ravenkind and the Tome of Strahd here in this session. And they see the coffins for the Brides of Strahd here. Two of them closed for Anastasia and Valenta, who were both killed in their physical form, but not staked and destroyed. And one open coffin for the remaining bride, Ludmilla, who still runs free. We end the session at this point before we proceed to the final session. Holy smokes, been talking for a minute, but we're almost done. Probably break these up into more videos in the future instead of trying to recap 4 months of play in one sitting, but lessons learned. All right, everybody's here for the last session. It's the big one. They push out of the room after exploring it a little bit. They also stake both of the vampires in their coffins, and they burn all of the coffins, set it on fire. So this room's filling with smoke, which pushes them out. They pull the lever, raise the portcullis, and really quickly, the first one walks out. The paladin comes into the room, steps on the teleporter trap, poof, vanishes. He wakes up in the white crypts down below. He's replaced by a white. The others that are remaining here fight the white. Another one of them, I believe the ranger, steps on a teleporter trap. He poof vanishes. Now there's two whites. The others are fighting them and kill them. And the other two wake up in the undercrypt down here. They wake up in the coffins of the white that they replaced. They push, the paladin's able to push the lid off pretty easily. He sees the ranger trying to get out of the other coffin, wades through the sea of bones, helps him out. They find the shaft opening here in the top, and they decide to start climbing up. Meanwhile, back here, after finishing killing the other white, one of the others steps on a trap, is replaced by a white. And at this point, the ranger and the paladin are actually back in the catacombs up on the other side. We'll look at it in a minute. While the monk and the warlock actually decides, you know what, I'm just going to trip this trap and replace myself. So the remaining two go to the white undercrypt, and there are two now whites just hanging out on the teleporter traps. So that shaft from the undercrypt comes up here. The warlock and the paladin pushing out. They're really careful now. The paladin grabs some rope. He cuts off a foot of it with a knot, and he's throwing it in. I really played up how this floor is just covered in like 6 inches of back guano. So he's grabbing that rope and he's just throwing it and just like sticking it in the just sea of back guano they're wading through. He's testing for teleporter traps. So he does that for a little while. Doesn't take long. The warlock and the monk climb up the shaft and rejoin them. They explore Crypt 13 and they find the musket, which was kind of fun. I explained it in a way that somebody who wouldn't know what a musket is as the scepter, which is the description. They get a chuckle out of figuring out, wait, is this a firearm? Yeah, it's a musket. They ignore the glider that's in there, though. They explore Crypt 7. They kind of push their way up. The whole time that they're in here, they hear just like weeping, because I have Strahd in Sergei's tomb, draped across the top of Sergei's tomb, weeping, crying, and we'll see why he's crying in a minute, not just because of Sergei, but it's just the emotions of a vampire. So they're pushing their way towards that noise. They search these crypts, which don't contain much. They have the firearm, which they give to the hunter, and they get up to the main area. I just have this gate open, and they see and hear Strahd draped across the coffin, and I have them see Irina. I have them see Irina's legs and feet and dress stained in blood as she is laying on the floor, apparently dead. So Strahd, at this point, they've taken so much time that they failed to rescue Irina, is what I determined, just due to the amount of time they took to get to her. The Strahd is fed on her. She's laying there, essentially like near death, almost dead, drained of blood. He still needs to bury her to fully do her conversion into a vampire. So that is already done. The monk sees this, rolls high in initiative, and the first thing that they do is charge into the room, grab a stake, and stake Irina straight through the heart. And I have Irina essentially do like the sternum rub awakening, just like gasping as the monk, witnesses, looks into the eyes of her friend as she stakes her through the heart, seeing her with the vampire marks, and she kills Irina to prevent her from turning into a vampire, which I think was a little bit of a shock. We had a little bit of like, oh shit, because that player is one of the more empathetic players that I have at the table. So her doing that action just so decisively was a moment, and it was kind of cool. I really appreciated that. Strahd is naturally enraged at seeing his beloved Tatiana staked in front of him, and the final fight begins in Strahd's tomb. So talk a little bit about how I ran Strahd. I found some strategies for how to run Strahd on a Reddit post that kind of broke it down in orders of difficulty, and I chose the middle one. So my players are not min-max hyper tactical players, but they like a challenge. So I chose I chose to have Strahd do the strategy as follows. He would use his legendary action on the turn before his to make sure that he moved, so that he would always start his turn outside of sunlight. So outside of the range of the sun sword. he would use his lair action at the top of every round to walk through walls. And this is how I was going to make him feel like a vampire. He would constantly be popping out of the walls, throwing a spell, and retreating back into the walls, always using his movement for his legendary actions to reposition. So he would always be showing up in a different place. I really made use of the crypts, like having him fly between the crypts. And I made use of this hallway here, having him move between and come out the other side. Now, this is going to be frustrating. The players adapted by holding a lot of actions, like the hunter would load the musket and use his held action looking for Strahd. Same with the warlock and his eldritch blasts. The paladin had a hold of the amulet of Ravenkind and the sun sword, so he pretty much always had his like finger on the button for the amulet to try to lock Strahd with the saving throw. The way that I was going to make this frustrating to kill Strahd but not boring and infuriating is I broke it up into phases. So Strahd starts out by moving into the crypts, and I bait them into opening this crypt looking for Strahd by using line of sight. I have them see him out here in the crypts, and I have them see him go into this crypt, and then I have him use line of sight to get somewhere else. So they still believe he's here, but he's in another place. And the paladin ends up taking the bait at one point, comes in here, and this actually has a ghost in it. So now he's fighting a ghost while the others are dealing with Strahd. Strahd opens up by throwing some fireballs, which the warlock counter spells. And as they start kind of getting frustrated with the fact that he's phasing through, I established that that's what he's going to do. They retreat into here so that they can all remain in the range of the icon of Ravenloft, and so that they can all fight together and group up. And they start taunting Strahd. So Strahd does a phase out of here, and he animates both of these guardian statues as large animated objects for them to fight, and phases back into the wall. While they're distracted by the guardian objects, trying not to die to those, he comes out and he takes some swipes at somebody and phases into the wall. He pops out a couple of times. He does land one pretty gnarly fireball on them when the warlock runs out of counter spells. When they dispatch the animated objects, he comes out and I have him in mirror image. So he's mirror imaged as he's phasing in and out of the walls, making it to where their held actions are missing more as they destroy more images. As they destroy the mirror images, I have Ludmilla show up. Especially now by this point, they're taunting him with, hey, look how many of your brides we've killed. So Ludmilla comes out as well in that final phase. They're able to land the icon a couple of times. Strahd naturally uses his legendary action to prevent it. His super action that, like, when he fails to save, he can just not fail instead. And as they're taunting and as time is dwindling, I have him, especially after they manage to kill Ludmilla, because she doesn't have as good of a save against the amulet, he starts fighting less optimally. Now, the other reason he starts fighting less optimally is they trigger this fight with Strahd right at the halfway mark. Our sessions are 3 hours, so I need to make this fight last an hour to an hour and 15 minutes or so. So that's part of why he's playing this. But as the time starts getting closer to the end, he starts fighting with just more wrath, more fury, and less brains, as his wives are now all dead. The monk took pride in being a near total annihilator of the wives, and he starts charging more. He takes less optimal moves. He starts his turn in sunlight a couple of times because fate dictates that he's very likely to make the suboptimal move, and they end up killing Strahd in the tomb. Now, I think the fight went pretty well. It dragged out. I felt like he felt like a vampire. I felt like there was enough other stuff in the room with the held actions and things to do that it was frustrating without being infuriating. And at the end, we do a bridge narration of them returning to Strahd's tomb. They stake him. The paladin grabs every jewel he can carry, crown, everything he can get out of here. And we end the session. So that was our game. Beginning to end. I kind of already shared how I feel that it went. I'm happy with it. I'm glad I ran it. 8 sessions was perfect for us. It was enough time to really live and breathe in Barovia. They got to see a lot of the castle. They got to explore. They got to meet some guest characters, the Were Ravens and Esmeralda, see some crypts. It was a success in my book. I'm glad I did this, and I'm glad I did it the way I did it. And if they go on in the future to play Curse of Strahd, a more full-length classic 5e campaign, they'll have some touchstones from my game, and will, hopefully they appreciate that and enjoy exploring the same world in more depth at another table. Oh, that was a lot. If you stuck with me all the way to the end here, I don't know why, but thank you for it. Thanks for being a part of my story, listening to our story, and I'll catch you in more of these videos in the future. All right, guys. See you next time.